This week on the WriterCon podcast.
One single piece. Well, speaking as an agent, my advice is very different from what a writer might offer or an editor might offer. I guess I'd quickly say to remember that everything you do, all the communication about your writing, the writing you do about your writing, something I call pitchcraft, the speaking that you do about your writing, it's a message in a bottle. You don't know whose desk you're going to land on, whose interest you're going to pique. You have no idea what's going to happen. And it's a good way to approach the industry when it comes to the great agent hunt.
Welcome to WriterCon, a gathering place for writers to share their knowledge about writing and the writing world. Your hosts are William Bernhardt, best-selling novelist and author of the Red Sneaker books on writing, and Lara Bernhardt, award-winning author of the Wantland Files book series.
Hey there, writers. Thanks for joining me and Jesse Ulrich. And who is that beautiful brunette wearing those funky headphones in the other square? In answer to queries we have received, yes, Lara Bernhardt and I are married, and we do actually live together. But Jesse makes us broadcast from different rooms for sound reasons. Well, not sound reasons, for audio reasons, right? So that's why I'm in front of all of these books, and Laura's in front of all those album covers and superhero figurines, right?
And more books, because our entire house is full of books, as you might suspect.
Jesse, was this a scheme to try and split us up? Is that what you're up to?
No, this is just a way for me to see all the different rooms in your house. We've also had Laura in the Donald Duck room, and so I'm just trying to secretly find out everything that's in your house. That's my goal here.
And now you can see what kind of music plays in our house.
Yeah, I see. I see a nice REM record. I see Paul Simon's Graceland, great album.
Good eyes. Yes, I'm impressed. All right, so evidently, Laura, you need to move to a different room for everyone.
I like that. We can play Where's Laura?
Yeah.
Which room
I like that. Yeah. All right, let me tell you that our interview.
I'm just looking for my best light.
I know. Our interview is with a terrific agent, but before you push pause, because it isn't an author, let me just tell you that this might well be one of the most beneficial interviews you ever hear. Quick version of my personal story, and of course this was a long time ago, but I spent 4 years getting my first agent despite having a completely finished manuscript, which I liked, and was eventually published and sold more than 500,000 copies. So I like to think it was okay, but that did not make it any easier to get an agent. It's an eternal challenge, which is why we spend so much time finding and bringing in top-tier agents for WriterCon and the cruise, and why our interview today is with friend of the podcast and on the cruise, because she's joining us, Katharine Sands, one of the most successful agents in the biz and definitely one of the nicest. She is with the prestigious Sarah Jane Freymann Literary Agency. She's got a great webpage there called My Manuscript Wish List that I think is one of the best and most useful things I've ever read. Anybody trying to sell a book should read what Katharine is writing. Oh, she's in the magazine too this month, isn't she, Laura?
Yes.
Yeah, thought so. So I'll put all those links in the show notes, and we will talk to Katharine Sands all about the world of agents and publishers. But first, the news. All right, our first story, which involves, I won't even tell you up front. There is a person named Dr. Stephanie Oni, and she is 75, but she still turns to her father when she has questions or wants someone to bounce ideas off of or to talk to her kids. How did he deal with racism, she wonders? How did he succeed against stacked odds? Well, the tricky part of this is that her father has been dead for more than a year, but she's listening to the answers delivered in her father's voice on her phone through an app called Hereafter AI. This is an app powered by artificial intelligence that generates responses based upon hours of recorded interviews with this gentleman before he died last year. Dr. Oni says that his voice gives her comfort, but she created the profile more for her children and grandchildren. I want the children to hear all those things in his voice, she said. Well, that's a spin on AI that I at least did not see coming. Jesse, let's assume you could use AI to have a conversation with someone you loved but lost. Would you do it?
At first I was just going to be glib about this answer, but honestly, like for example, I never got to meet either of my grandfathers. They both passed away before I was born. And honestly, I would love to hear from them. And so, now that we have the technology to record people's voices and to give a lot of information, I'm not against this. I don't know if I would personally do it, but I'm not against if someone is willing to do the work to be interviewed enough to, sort of give a slice of their personality to an AI program. I'm not against this. I'm worried about where the technology for this could go. Like we are fast approaching the, for any of my sci-fi fans out there, the, we are Legion, we are Bob sort of area of this, where what is our consciousness and what is our personality and what does that mean and how to contain such a thing. That this leads to a lot of questions that we have not talked about as far as AI goes on this podcast.
Yeah. I mean, we've got deep fakes now with people who are still living.
Yeah.
Lara, what's your take on this?
I'm with Jesse in that my kids never really got to meet the majority of my grandparents, and that crushes me. I wish that they had gotten to know them a little bit. I was trying to record my mom's father's experiences flying in the Navy in one of the wars before we lost him, and I only got a little bit of it down, not nearly enough. And our boys are huge history fanatics and would have loved to have been able to hear what it was like for him. And just, I'm not trying to be, like Jesse said, not trying to be glib, this is giving me kind of Harry Potter vibes, how they have the photos that move and speak. Yes, it just, everything that, it feels like it's kind of a move in that direction, which I thought was just fantastical when I read it, but kind of cool. But the way this is being used to be able to save for future generations the voice, the thoughts, the experiences of their family members, I wish that I could capture some of that and be able to share.
Yeah, I think that's a great take. I mean, a lot of the publicity on this is talked about, it's like a seance. You're trying to contact the dead. They've compared it to, your history buffs may recall that at one point Thomas Edison spent years trying to invent a spirit phone by which people could call and obviously call the dead people. And obviously that didn't work. But this isn't, and I hope a parent would explain this isn't really talking to the dead. This is generated by something that happened while.
Yeah, it's
your grandfather.
I don't even have very many photographs of my grandparents to be able to share them and say, this is who we come from. These were my grandparents. And as I try to share stories with them, so not even having photographs, surely we could describe that it's kind of akin to that. But I write supernatural suspense, and I would get behind a spirit phone too. So
you could use this in a book. Yes.
Well, and I'm wondering, and this is bringing in my old life into it, but I know that the largest, the Holocaust organization started by Steven Spielberg after the Schindler's List has been working on a project where, using interviews from Holocaust survivors, people coming to the center could interact with them like as a hologram. And I'm wondering if this is where that's, if that sort of direction is where this could be most useful, where like I would love to, go to a museum and yell at a hologram of Ben Franklin. Like, that would be fun for me.
Wow. That's like right out
That's
of
kind of brilliant.
451.
Yeah.
You remember the wife who talks to basically the ongoing serial on the walls. It's television sort of, but with an AI intelligence that allows them to interact. Bradbury was way ahead of his time.
Look at us catching up to sci-fi.
Yeah.
All right, news story number 2. This one involves a first-time author. Saddest thing in the world. She lost a major book deal with Penguin Random House after she was accused of trying to sabotage other authors by posting negative reviews under an alias. Perhaps I should make it clear that when I said this is the saddest thing in the world, I'm not excusing her behavior. I just remember how exciting it was when my first book was about to be published, and now, she's going to not have the same glorious experience. This story actually broke a couple of weeks ago, but I held back hoping there would be some new developments to explain this because, it didn't even make sense to me, but now we have a little bit more information. Let me explain the situation. Kate Corain, who is the author of what was a forthcoming novel, science fiction novel called Crown of Starlight, that was coming out until this backlash about the review bombing. Since then, she has been dropped by her U.S. publisher and her agent. Her book had even been selected for one of those subscription boxes, and she's been kicked out of that now because she was caught allegedly posting fake negative reviews to Goodreads, which is, of course, called review bombing. She'd created a bunch of anonymous accounts, or, not anonymous, but not with her real name on it. And suspicion started when people, particularly writers of other books, noticed that the same named accounts were leaving scathing 1-star reviews on a bunch of books by other authors that weren't yet released, but were going to be released about the same time as Kate Corain's book. Internet users also alleged that the vast majority of the targeted books were written by people of color. And then they discovered that those accounts that seemed to be trashing everybody else all gave Crown of Starlight a 5-star review. And at that time, she was basically nailed. She initially claimed that a friend had been behind the review bombing, and she shared screenshots of Discord conversations between her and this alleged Lily, but no one was convinced and pointed out that if you looked at the timestamps on the video, you could see that the conversations had been edited. More recently, she explained that her alleged friend Lily was in fact non-existent. She said she'll be reaching out to the affected authors, whatever that means, and going into an intensive psychiatric care and rehab facility. Quote, "All I can do going forward is to try to live my life in a way that shows you there aren't empty words." Rather than just saying, "I have no idea what that means." Laura, what's your take? What do you think it means? Or Jesse, anybody?
Well, first of all, you're leaving out the most important part of the story, which is who caught her. Like at some point in this, she tried to place blame on a very small subsection of Star Wars fans who are really into Rey and Kylo Ren fan fiction.
Right.
Reylos, I believe they're called. And you don't listen, internet, don't mess with super niche IP groups. These people are dedicated and smart and have a lot of time on their hands and no technology. You will be caught.
Yeah, well, it's a science fiction novel, and some of the other authors that she was trashing have said publicly, "I haven't gotten my apology yet."
Yeah.
She's making public statements, but she hasn't said anything to me. Laura, what do you think?
It's sounding, I know we keep saying alleged, it's sounding like she really did this, and it blows my mind. I can't.
Well, I don't
imagine.
I
work.
So that's why I keep saying alleged.
Let me just say, I work so hard with aspiring writers,
right,
and help with their editing. Everything that I do, everything that I'm pouring my own time and energy and blood into, is to lift aspiring authors and try to bring people up. I think we talked at the Women's Fiction Writers Association, when that door is open for you, even if you've just got it cracked and got a little bit of a foot in the door, try to get as many people in as you can. And that's absolutely what I do. And I offer support and advice. I just can't imagine. It crushes me to think that somebody in a situation where they've been handed what so many people are aspiring for have to go out and try to tear down others to feel better about themselves, I guess, to try to make their book look better. It's just, I can't wrap my brain around that. That's not how I operate.
I'll try and be slightly sympathetic. She is young. I don't know if she's getting good counseling. I'm not going to turn this into a WriterCon commercial, but I will say that if she had friends in the industry, if she had people to bounce ideas off of, this would not have happened. This seems to me like the behavior of someone who is very insular and needs friends, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, all she had to do was do nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
And also another reminder that Goodreads is not regulated and is a terrible way of sort of rating and reviewing books.
And people choose what they're going to read based on those. So that's, and they do that. That's why they were after them. No, I'm with you, Bill. You're so kind-hearted. But at the same point, like, I know you've never gone and left a nasty review. I'll be honest. Even if I read a book and I don't like it, I just don't review. I cannot bring myself to leave even a mediocre review for a mediocre book because I don't want to hurt that person. I know that they worked hard and maybe somebody else really did love it. I can't do it. I can't tear somebody else down, even if I think it's going to lift me up, which it doesn't, by the way.
Yeah.
Trashing someone else does not lift you up. So that's just awful.
Yeah, too bad. All right, Jesse, cue up the music. Let's take a brighter note and talk to Katharine Sands. Katharine, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, even though you've been on before, I'm still going to ask the traditional first question because who knows, your answer may have changed or you might have decided you didn't like your previous answer. Who knows? So, first question, if you could offer writers one piece of advice, what would it be?
One single piece. Well, speaking as an agent, my advice is very different from what a writer might offer or an editor might offer. I guess I'd quickly say to remember that everything you do, of all the communication about your writing, the writing you do about your writing, something I call pitchcraft, the speaking that you do about your writing, it's a message in a bottle. You don't know whose desk you're going to land on, whose interest you're going to pique. You have no idea what's going to happen. And it's a good way to approach the industry when it comes to the great agent hunt.
Right. Which, you've already said it. You're an agent, which means you've got what almost everyone wants. So can you describe how you go about selecting the, relatively slender number of people who will become your clients?
Well, it's not very scientific. I think of myself as a book dowser.
You don't have an AI program for that yet?
Not yet, but they tell us it's coming. We're all replaceable by AI, but not yet. I have what I call my dowser feeling, and it's something like the water witch is feeling when she goes into the desert and finds water. I can feel it, and if this starts happening, I know I should select the writer as a client, and it isn't necessarily based on merit or even talent. Sometimes somebody's absolutely publishable, and I'm just not the right agent. for any number of reasons. So that's how I make a choice. I get my dowser throb and I know I'm the one.
Just get a gut feeling. I would not have guessed that, but I love it. That's so cool.
It's slightly different from a gut feeling. It's more of it's more proactive in that if I'm doing this, it means I want to pick up that phone or I want to pick up that megaphone and I want to talk about this writer's work. And that's not always a gut feeling as much as it is a feeling that, yes, I'm the partner they need.
Very nice. Very cool. Well, was there an author ever that you remember really surprised you? Maybe the book or the client, the author, surprised you by doing better than what you had expected?
Well, we had a huge success last year. I was not the agent at the time for Jarvis Masters and a book called That Bird Has My Wings. The book was actually published years ago, 2009, but it led to so many interesting things, including Oprah selecting it for her book club.
Wow.
So she had read the book in 2014, but she selected it for last year, and it became a New York Times bestseller and led to many extraordinary things. So that was a big surprise.
Yeah, that's a nice surprise. Yeah. Okay, conversely, no names, not asking for anything.
Unless you really want to, but yeah.
Have you had a situation that kind of went the other way?
I'll confess to one. Sorry, I may start crying, but a book was touted for bestsellerdom. We had sales to Japan, to Italy, Spain, so many countries were going to do events for the very mediagenic authors. Agents are allowed to say mediagenic. We're not allowed to say attractive. But COVID happened, and I begged the author to let us put the pub date back. And the author wouldn't hear of it, and the book went nowhere. And so, yes, that's the opposite of...
That is very disappointing.
Very disappointing, really deserving book. And I even did something somewhat off book in calling the publisher and saying, surely we can agree this shouldn't come out now. But usually I love to be right, but not in this case.
Oh, no, not for that.
Well, I know that you have done a lot of work, and even beyond being an agent, you've been involved with helping writers find their path, which is, of course, like the WriterCon mission statement. You mentioned a couple minutes ago pitchcraft. You did a long workshop on pitching at WriterCon maybe 2 years ago. People are still talking about it. That was terrific. Maybe we need to have that again this fall. Anyway, you can't do the whole 3 hours or whatever it is, but give our listeners a taste or a few tips for pitching.
Oh, well, thank you very much. That thrills me. I often get wonderful letters saying I took your workshop and connected with another agency. And I think, well, that's wonderful too.
Yeah.
I really became an evangelist for pitchcraft because I realized at one early point, and now there's much more attention paid to the pitching stage, but when I first did my book, Making the Perfect Pitch, there really wasn't. And I came to see it's absolutely what starts everything in motion. So quick tips. I would say that I work with a formula called place, person, pivot, which I've amended from Donald Moss's formula, which is setting, protagonist, problem. So if you're pitching a memoir or fmemoir or himwa or a work of fiction, in terms of pitching, you want to nail those elements so that somebody could repeat back to you 10 minutes later, the place, the person, and the pivot. And then for nonfiction, it's so important to answer the questions, why you? Why are you the best person to write this? And why now? What's in the zeitgeist? Or what does the readers need from this book? So those are some very quick tips. But if you have 3 hours, I'll give you the rest of them.
Or maybe come to WriterCon.
Better yet. I loved being at WriterCon. It was a terrific place.
Katharine, how do you deal with what I would think, particularly for a person as nice as you, the hardest part of the job, which is, of course, having to say no? Like when a perfectly lovely person pitches you a book that you know is just not ready yet. How do you handle that?
Well, I've come to not really think of it as no. No doesn't necessarily mean no. It just might mean that I'm not the choice, or it's not the right timing. Or as you point out, often something's just too early and might need careful oversight or development. That means that it's not ready for what an agent does, and except for those of us who are working editorially more and more. It's not meant to be no. We see good and turn down good stuff all the time. But I do liken myself and other agents to emergency room physicians. I think we're triaging.
Doing triage, yes.
And you don't think, oh my God, that's a 5-year-old, that's somebody's mother. You don't think that. You do the job. If you're the surgeon on ER or Grey's Anatomy, if the cop killer comes in along with the cop, you have to bring your A game to both. And so it's something of a detachment. But I always tell people, as do many of us, sometimes it's just subjective. Somebody else may see the possibilities that I'm missing.
That's fascinating. So we've talked about you having been to WriterCon, but this year you're joining us for the first time on the WriterCon Cruise.
Yes.
Which I'm very excited about. Are you looking forward to it?
Oh, please. I'm practically packed and I can't.
That helps me feel better. I'm already picking out what I'm going to take.
I'm so excited. I think you've put together something so wonderful.
Yeah, it's so much fun, but it's also it's intensely educational. I think it's just packed with information. So are you thinking about what you'll be talking about? What are you going to be sharing with us this year? Can you give us a little idea of that?
Well, we have sailing days and workshop days, and some of the workshops will focus on pitching and some will focus on developing material. And I want to bring to it everything I know about how to ready work for publication, which is very different from a supportive writers group or anything else. So I'm looking forward to really working very closely on the material.
You bring
like one-on-one
business side of the business, I think, and that can be hugely valuable to aspiring authors. Absolutely.
Well, also the crafting for publication is so very different. And often a newer writer or someone working on a memoir, for example, forgets what those other eyes might see because they're looking backwards and we're looking only forward as readers.
That's a great point. Yeah. How do you respond when people ask you, should they get an agent and try to go the traditional publishing route, which could take a while, or if they're worried about time, or just not sure that they have it in them, or just self-publish. So if someone's asking you I kind of feel like you would prefer that they have an agent and go the traditional route, but maybe that's not right. How do you respond to that?
Well, it's funny because my answer has really changed over the years. What I would have said years ago, oh no, self-publishing, run. And now I would never say that because there have been so many successes and there are so many ways writers can proactively market and publicize their own books. As an agent, I'm naturally going to come down on the side of the traditional model of agent takes project to publisher. And yes, I often say in a class, try that at home, call up Simon and Schuster and see how to get to anybody. And you won't because everything's set up to keep you from ever reaching an editor. And, you've got robotic turnaround waiting for you if you try that route. But for people who have the means of publicizing, possibly they have outreach, a restaurant, a medical practice. Of course, they can possibly self-publish, maybe reach the 4,000 or 5,000 copies sold, which seems to be the area that the number that a trade publisher would want to see, and then shift over into trade publishing. And we're going to see more of that than ever before. The other thing I suggest is sometimes if you do have a beautiful family story that you want to preserve, of course you should self-publish. It may not be right for the book world as a for-profit business, but it should should absolutely be a book that people can see. But mostly I find myself saying things like, try that test, call up a trade publisher and see what happens. If nothing does, then you want to think about what it's involved to find a literary agent to do that for you.
Mm-hmm. I always cringe when I ask this question because
maybe you shouldn't ask it.
How many queries do you get?
Oh no, I cringe hearing the question. It's never ending. I'm not numeric, really. I know
that's the best answer. You can't count that high.
But I mean, I don't think that way. I know people who keep charts of these things. I don't. It pours in the door. It's an oceanic tide.
Yeah.
But what I would immediately say to any writer is you have to believe you're in that 1% that might get through. You just have to believe it. So it doesn't matter what other people are pitching. And mostly it's not overwhelmingly wonderful. It's too early or hopeless.
Right.
And hopeless is not a word I like to use for writers, not at all, but shorthand word.
Right.
It's not competitive.
Really make sure that you've prepared and done your research and done everything you possibly can before sending that query in. Because I know we've heard from people that it's terrifying to me what they sometimes open up in their inbox that people would send it like that.
Well, it's not just that. There's so much available online today. You don't have to do that much research to get a sense of how a query might be winning, as opposed to just not going to happen. But I'm in an agents group and we do share some of the funny ones, and but we also are respectful. This is our livelihood, and this is how we often connect with new writers. This and conferences are probably the ways most of us find new clients.
Mm-hmm. So we've established that you probably look at a lot of manuscripts, and some inevitably are going to be better than others and chosen or not chosen. I know a lot of people listening to this podcast are possibly, polishing off the manuscript and getting ready to email it tomorrow morning. So can you describe what are some of the red flags that you see most frequently that tell you, no, this one's not ready, or this one's not for me, or anything like that? This one's not going to be picked up by me anyway.
Well, I call the red flags querial killers, and those are the series of mistakes that writers make when they
querial, like cereal. I got it. Oh, that's great.
When they set out to woo and win literary agents. And today we definitely have a kind of alchemy between the query letter and the first page. And we do make a lot of decisions about that all-important first page.
Right.
So to say red flag, I wouldn't necessarily call it a red flag, but sometimes things are just informational and there's no story that's starting to engage you. There are a couple of querial killers, the weather report or the letter in the attic or something too passive, that make it all too easy to just say, I'm going to move on.
Yeah. Wait, the letter in the attic? What's the letter in the attic?
Well, people waking up from a dream or, there's a letter from grandma, that kind of thing. I mean, it's very passive story. But I try to be careful because I never want to sound disrespectful. I really support all writers' quests and creativity, in wanting to aspire to publication. Yeah. But as an agent in New York City, we're moving through these very rapidly to find something commercial and potentially saleable.
What does your typical workday look like?
Oh dear. Well, what it really looks like, or how I'd like you to
if you
think.
Have a typical workday. Yes.
Well, I suppose that's your prerogative. You can decide. But I'm curious. I'm fascinated by what your real workday looks like. But up to you.
Well, I'd say I do hear of agents who organize different days. Maybe they'll have a reading day. Maybe they'll have a contract day. My day is much more kaleidoscopic than that. There's putting out whatever fire was left over from the day before.
Yeah.
You know, you try to work in blocks of things, but I find that impossible. I find that it's very much about leapfrogging from one project to the other, getting yourself in the space of a submission, for example. You know, if you have a submission that's pending, that's a very particular day. You know, researching and preparing the submission list and then getting the submission out is one day. Another day might be just reading submissions, which, you know, again, turns into something else usually.
Interesting. One of my professors in college way back when, I remember her saying that she felt like she just got up in the morning and sort of threw herself at life and hoped that she managed to get through everything she had to that day. I have days like that. I understand exactly what she was talking about.
Well, there are things at different stages. I mean, you wake up and you look at email and somebody's looking into the Romanian rights for something, and you know somebody else is pitching you a new book, and then you have hopefully 2 offers pending for something. I mean, you have so many different little moments in the day with regard to different projects.
Katharine, do you have any future plans that you want to talk about on this podcast?
Well, future plans are to head to WriterCon
the
on
cruise.
the high
Yes,
seas.
we know about that.
That's a major highlight coming
today
up.
when it's 2 degrees where I live. That sounds pretty good.
I'm dreaming of beaches and sun.
And ideally to seeing happy homes for the projects I have on submission.
Yes, of course. Katharine, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it so much.
Just a few parting words. Lara, we are getting pretty close to the registration deadline for the WriterCon Cruise. Tell us about the cruise, please.
The cruise is an incredible opportunity to really immerse yourself in whatever your current writing project is. We're on the boat. We meet in small groups. You're going to be working on your manuscript, and everyone in your small group is going to read it for you too. So you're going to get real-time feedback. You'll be led by someone who will be happy to give you their advice as well. You can meet with an agent if you want to. Everybody who wants to gets the chance to meet with an agent, or with Bill, or with me, or with anybody else. We are there for you. We want to make sure you have the best possible time you can. We could maybe even meet in the hot tub if you want. Then you could, you see me in a swimsuit, or maybe that's like not a draw. I don't know, but either way, we can.
It's a draw for me. Everybody else, stay in your room, okay?
Also, for fans of this podcast, you get to see a live version of this podcast on a boat or ship,
depending on you get to meet us in person.
Yeah, we're delightful.
Yeah, and let me emphasize, when Lara talks about everybody meets the agent, that's one-on-one. Assuming you want it. You can talk to her about
clarify
your
that.
manuscripts, your thoughts for the future, whatever you want. And let me tell you, Katharine is very smart. She'll have the answers you're looking for. All right. And let me also mention that if you haven't joined the WriterCon Facebook group, that's a great way to get all the latest information. And please subscribe to the WriterCon newsletter. And let me just quickly differentiate between the newsletter and the magazine that we keep talking about. The newsletter is short and comes out once a week or so on Substack. If you subscribe, even a free subscription, you'll get the newsletter and you'll get my posts on recent news items, but the much more comprehensive magazine with longer articles written by other authors and agents and whatnot, that requires a subscription. But just go to Substack, find WriterCon, and decide where you want to start, and that'll be fine, okay? All right. Until next time, everybody, keep writing. And remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. See you next time.